Hey guys, in a previous video I had referenced this book by David J. Moore titled The Good, the Tough, and the Deadly. It basically covers action movies and stars from 1960 to present. It's quite comprehensive. Pretty much any action film you could think of is covered in this book. Anyway, I was inspired to make this video based on a comment that somebody made about David J. Moore. They actually said, David J. Moore is a moron. An action movie book with no diehard, it's an embarrassment. His criteria for what he considers an action star is just plain ridiculous. So, I'm going to make the video, What is an action star? And basically read you the introduction.
You read on the show?
Because he breaks it down very nicely, and of course I'll be providing some of my own commentary. But let's see what an action star is, according to David J. Moore.
Here we go. I'm ready.
Long, long ago, men were men. Before gymnasiums, before porn, before Monday Night Football, men toiled and fought and died wielding axes and swords while defending their villages and lands. I think life's a little bit better now, to be honest, man. But yes, I get what he's saying. Yeah, in this day and age, they really kind of blur the definitions between men and women, which I'm not going to get into right now.
Just do it!
Anyway, somehow, over time, the world made men into suffering slackjaws who were made to put on suits and ties, commute to work in wheeled boxes and rolling trains, and be kept alive with caffeine, nicotine, Red Bulls, and fast food. I still think life is better in general than how it was, but yeah, a lot of that stuff is pretty pathetic, man. Anyway, instead of your caffeine, your nicotine, your Red Bulls, and all that stuff, you guys should find some healthier addictions. So, for example, this greens powder. Drink that. Boost your immunity. Feel better. Offset some of that other stuff you're putting in your system. Anyway, link below. Highly recommended. Powerful green supplement. The invaders of time and change cruelly mutated men into pale-faced, fluorescent-lit, suit-wearing drones who no longer saw the sun on the plains or the moonlit-bloodied fields of battle. The age of masculinity had passed, and by the time that Hollywood began to figure out this unstoppable travesty, it was already too late.
Too late? No such thing as too late.
Hollywood's belated response to the death of, quote, real men translated into cowboys and Indians action movies. The John Waynes, the Gary Coopers, and the Audie Murphys. I don't even know who that last one is.
Raised as an orphan, wounded 3 times in the war, our nation's most decorated soldier, winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor. He's the author of a bestseller and a motion picture star. No more need be said to introduce Audie Murphy. Hi, Jack. Hello, everyone.
As the years progressed, these films transitioned into the form of the modern action film. In the wake of Vietnam and the peace, love, and understanding rallies in the homeland, America reeled over its name-your-own movements, and it wasn't until the early 1980s that the modern action film became something immediately recognizable. Yeah, the 80s were where it's at as far as action movies go, right? With Stallone and Arnold pumping them out. Then you had Seagal and Van Damme. Oh, what an era. With the rise of muscular soldiers, kickboxers, and stalwart, gun-wielding renegade karate cops came back the identity of warriors, fighters, and men. While actors like Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, and Burt Reynolds were establishing themselves as movie stars, headlining mainstream films that became box office successes, they really weren't known as action stars. They and almost all of their contemporaries throughout the 60s, 70s, and beyond were known as actors or performers whose films weren't necessarily considered action films. What an action film is really pertains to the events that happen in the picture and how they are presented. Yeah, presentation is key because depending on the film, the way it's presented, I mean, you could even change the genre. Look what they did with The Shining. They literally made that into like a comedy, for example. Somebody just kind of mixing up the trailer and presenting it in a different way with different music.
Meet Jack Torrance.
I'm outlining a new writing project.
He's a writer looking for inspiration. Shining.
Dirty Harry, 1971, Clint Eastwood, can be considered an action film. Bullet, 1968, Steve McQueen, and Malone, 1987, with Burt Reynolds, can also be considered action films. Many of the movies Eastwood, McQueen, and Reynolds starred in are action movies, but these guys are not action stars. They're actors. What defines an action star is dependent on who they are in life, where they've come from, and their physical abilities. Okay, so that's why Bruce Willis does not qualify.
I was always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually.
Now, obviously, with Arnold being a champion bodybuilder, Stallone, living in the gym, especially for those Rocky and Rambo films. Van Damme and Seagal, martial arts masters. So these are the real people, the real deal. And then they happen to be in movies and action movies. So yeah, I kind of see where David J. Moore's going here. In the grand study of the good, the tough, and the deadly, action movies and stars 1960 to the present, I found a common denominator in all or most of the stars I covered. And in the years I spent working on it, I realized that on the greater whole, these stars were bringing to the screen the missing link of physical strength, prowess, and abilities lost in time through the age of industry, Wall Street, socioeconomic depressions, the rise of female empowerment, and gender dysmorphia. Political correctness, a fairly modern concept, really didn't apply to the golden age of action stars when Chuck Norris and Sylvester Stallone were obliterating legions of villains of usually ethnic descent while casually moving on to the next wave of slangs. Action stars, both male and female, embody a standard found through athleticism, martial arts, and sports, with very few exceptions. In the culling of my search for action stars, I found it to be much easier to cover only those men and women who had made the crossover from professional sports, martial arts, and various other avenues such as bodybuilding, professional wrestling, and stunt work in films. Their rule eliminated the fringe action stars like Eastwood, Reynolds, McQueen, and many others who might be considered action stars like Bruce Willis, Kurt Russell, or Mel Gibson. For example, while Die Hard 1988 and Lethal Weapon 1987 are integral and influential action films, the stars in them are not, by definition, action stars, because in their successive films, they would be starring in the likes of The Story of Us, 1999, Bruce Willis, What Women Want, 2000 with Mel Gibson, or Captain Ron, 1992 with Kurt Russell, just to name three. Exceptions were made for stars such as Charles Bronson, Sylvester Stallone, Michael Dudikoff, and various others like Jason Statham simply because the greater body of their work is very clearly embodied by physicality and action. And the consensus is that they are without a doubt action stars. Through their careers, they consistently maintain the action star persona with very little variation. And off-screen, they keep in prime shape, regardless of age. Yeah, and a lot of these guys, I mean, maybe not so much Steven Seagal, but most of them actually did keep in very good shape.
It is the truth.
And there is a big difference between an action film and being an action star. So obviously, a lot of people can be in an action movie, but not necessarily be action stars. So David J. Moore is really kind of hitting the nail on the head here, in my opinion. In Bronson's case, once he starred in Death Wish, 1974, at the age of 53, his career literally became defined by that one film, and his successive films and his image became attached to the persona he displayed in it. One film after another, Bronson was the guy from Death Wish, despite the fact that he made dozens of other action films before and after it. With Stallone, two films defined his career: Rocky, 1976, which he wrote, and First Blood, 1982, based on a book by David Morrell. Forever after, Stallone's image was irrevocably tied to the two iconic characters from those two films, Rocky Balboa and John Rambo. Action film after action film, Stallone's successful career inevitably veered toward making more sequels to those two films. I really hope we still get a Rocky 7, man. Click this video. I did kind of a discussion on that based on Stallone's own comments somewhat recently. And, you know, if we don't get a Rocky, I hope we get another Rambo. I mean, Rambo Last Blood was... People have mixed feelings towards it. I liked it for what it was, but I want to see more. I want another Rambo. With Statham, who had been a professional swimmer, his action star career took off when he starred in the martial arts action film The Transporter from 2002. I remember that one. Like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and of course the martial art guys like Seagal and Van Damme were starting to go to straight to video. Statham actually burst out and seemed pretty nice as like the new action guy going to the theater doing martial arts. So I didn't love The Transporter, though. I thought it was pretty good, and I think it's actually aged pretty well. Spawning two sequels and an unshakable familiarity with the role he played in those films, Statham has become one of the last successful action stars to emerge in the new millennium. Despite not being a real martial artist, he has maintained a visage of being a martial arts-driven action star, and he continues making theatrical releases that feature him in full action star mode. Yeah, his films are really kind of a throwback to that 80s, 90s era. And Don the Dragon Wilson actually makes a really good point about Jason Statham, by the way.
Look, Jason Statham looks good in the movies. He's never won a kickboxing title or point fighting title, and he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. He looks great. All that stuff is unnecessary anyway.
There's a reason this book had to be written. Since I was very young, going to the movies to see action movies with action stars has been an integral part of my life. Watching pictures with action stars on video has been just as important and vital. Growing up in the 1980s and early 1990s was the right time to fall in love with action heroes like Rambo, John Matrix, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, 1985, The American Ninja, Michael Dudikoff, 1985, and the dude from Gymkata, Kurt Thomas, 1985. Yeah, I remember that. Most people didn't really know his name growing up, but he was the dude from Gymkata, which I think he was a professional gymnast. I mean, he definitely had the skills.
His name? Kurt Thomas. His title, 3-time world gymnastics champion, with the explosive force of karate. And a new, all-powerful martial art is born. Gymkata.
This was the VHS era, the time of the Reagan administration, and then Bush, and then America was changing and VHS was out and DVD was coming in. The mom and pop video stores were stocked full of movies starring Dolph Lundgren, Don the Dragon Wilson, Billy Blanks, Lawrence Alamis, which check out the interviews I did recently with Lawrence Alamis. Those were amazing. Cynthia Rothrock, and all the other B-action stars like Olivia Gruner, Jeff Speakman, Brian Bosworth, and David Bradley, who weren't making movies with any aspirations higher than they could kick. These were blue-collar movies for men who worked all day, came home tired, and wanted to pop an action movie in the VCR or the DVD player and just soak in the explosions, the kung fu, and the stunts. Trust me, there's nothing better at the end of the day than watching ninjas chasing other ninjas, or seeing Cynthia Rothrock fighting Richard Norton again and again. It's the sort of thing that moms and dads should raise their children on, like cartoons, cereal, and Flintstones vitamins.
We are Flintstones kids, 10 million strong and growing.
Yeah, remember those Flintstones vitamins? I'm pretty sure those did nothing. I don't even know if your body would really break them down and absorb it. You want to get real vitamins, man, you got to get something like Microfactor, by the way. 6 products in one, and you will absorb these. These aren't just some like hard pill. These are actually powders that are encapsulated, so your body will actually absorb them. Check it out, link below. That's recommended for everybody just for overall health. You know, they say take your vitamins, but if you're going to take vitamins, take high quality vitamins. These movies, and more importantly, these stars are important. It's not just that they have muscles, or they can do roundhouse kicks, or deliver catchy one-liners after a smackdown.
What'd you do with Sully?
I let him go.
No. It's that they transcend acting and present themselves pretty much as they are in real life. They're the real thing. Bruce Lee, the martial artist, is Bruce Lee, the actor. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the 7-time Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, is Arnold Schwarzenegger, the actor.
I'm Hercules.
Terry Hulk Hogan, the WWE wrestler, is Terry Hulk Hogan, the actor, or Thunderlips.
All my love slaves out there, Thunderlips is here, in the flesh, baby.
These guys arguably don't act. They just are themselves, as they are, as they always will be in the eyes of their fans. You can say that some of them deliver solid Academy Award-worthy performances on occasion, Stallone in Rocky or Copland, 1997, but that's an exception to the rule. When I watch a movie with Stone Cold Steve Austin, I'm not expecting a special performance from him. I'm expecting an action movie with some scenes of hardcore fighting, with Austin in the center, stiff-necked and primed for hard-hitting action. Movie after movie, time after time, I know that these action stars are putting almost every effort in keeping themselves in shape and delivering what they can to the best of their abilities in these films, many of which simply don't deserve them in it. For every few great action movies starring an action star like Stallone or Schwarzenegger, there's a half dozen substandard movies starring the likes of Steven Seagal, Wesley Snipes, or Roddy Piper. I love these guys, all of them, but at some point in all their careers, there's a slip in quality and an inevitable decline in their abilities as martial artists or whatever skills they had as athletes, wrestlers, or whatever. Boy, aging is cruel, isn't it? In some instances, while they age and lose muscle mass, agility, and flexibility, men like Stallone and Van Damme have kept up the fight and defy whatever odds are against their bodies and keep themselves in shape and put every effort into giving their fans and their egos the next film. Age be damned. It's important to acknowledge action stars and their contributions to cinema because they virtually defined an era, and they helped build empires and movie studios, creating and boosting an economy of action and martial arts films for decades. Yeah, that is true. I mean, the martial arts film genre will probably never be what it was in the 80s and 90s. Hopefully it'll be better than what it has been in the last 20 years. Like, I do think everything is cyclical, but again, we need the right quality film. And you get some every once in a while, but they're few and far between. Countries all over the world have hosted action film productions, stimulating economic growth both on the production side of filmmaking and when those films were made available to see in theaters, to rent, purchase, or stream on the internet. The stars of these films have become household names, brands really, and are known all over the world for what they can deliver. They have become heroes to impressionable fans, young and old alike, men and women all across the board, Yeah, they really are brands. Like back in the day, you figured a new Stallone movie was coming out, you kind of knew what to expect. Same with like a Van Damme, Seagal, or Arnold movie. It's like, hey, it's an Arnold movie. And you're watching it primarily because of that. I don't think actors in general really have the same draw anymore. Like now it's like, hey, a new Batman movie. It's like, I don't really care who's playing Batman, to be honest. I don't. I mean, they're probably going to get a pretty good actor to play Batman and pull it off. I would assume the casting process is quite extensive. So, but you're not really, you don't watch these movies for the actors anymore, man. Writing this book wasn't a fan experience for me so much as it was grafting my love and appreciation of these men and women in these films to an intensive study on the greater bodies of their work as a whole. All collated and collected into one volume. Yeah, this book is insane, guys. You guys gotta check it out. It's linked in the description below. Just get it from Amazon or something. Watching 30 Don the Dragon Wilson movies in a row over a 3-week period was an interesting experience, unlike anything I had ever done before. I won't tell you that I liked all of the films, but I learned some things about Don Wilson that I'd never known before. I studied him rather than the movies themselves. And the same goes for every action star my contributors and I covered in this book. We watched every single action film and fringe action film that every single real deal action star ever starred or appeared in with a significant role. This was an exhausting and exhaustive process, particularly because we did it in a 2-year time span. This is a book for devoted fans of action stars all across the shelf. We go back to the 1960s and early 1970s when Bronson, Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, Jim Kelly, Bruce Lee, and Tom Laughlin were exploring undiscovered territory and trailblazing for others of their ilk and backgrounds to follow. Others then paved and cemented the path men like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, and Steven Seagal. These were the titans who rose to prominence and spawned generations of emulators and would-bes. These are the stars I wanted to talk about and study, all the way down the line. Several guidelines were mapped out as to exactly what types of films we review because many of these stars have appeared in films that were not deemed action films per se, films in various genres including sword and sorcery or fantasy, outright comedies,
Put that cookie down! Now!
or films that were set in ancient times that simply did not pertain to our study. Schwarzenegger's Conan films, 1982 and 1984, and Red Sonja, 1985, were not reviewed for this book for reasons that felt obvious. Jackie Chan's films prior to his first international crossover, The Big Brawl, aka Battle Creek Brawl, 1980, largely consisted of Chinese kung fu movies set in ancient China, and were therefore not as pertinent to our study as his films following his English language debut. We encountered many challenges involving Asian martial arts stars, and in order to keep a rein on our coverage, we only included specific action and martial arts stars whose impact on the world of action was felt globally. If they were able to break the world barrier by starring or appearing in an English language film at some point in their careers like Yu Wang did in 1975's The Man from Hong Kong, aka Dragon Files, we included those films, knowing full well that the stars had made an impact in their respective native countries and were able to land starring or supporting roles in films that Western audiences would see. In Bruce Lee's case, we made sure to cover all of his work because he continues to be an influence on burgeoning martial arts and action stars the world over. Yeah, what a legend, man. He's the equivalent of Arnold Schwarzenegger to bodybuilding, man.
I'm Hercules.
An icon, a legend, will always be the GOAT, basically. We wanted to keep our stars and their films limited to more or less contemporary action films with few exceptions. In the case of westerns, we included those that were integral to that star's body of work, like Olivia Gruner's Savate, aka The Fighter, from 1995, or Shanghai Noon from 2000, with Jackie Chan. We tried hard to keep our study to films set mostly in and around modern times, otherwise our examinations would have exploded with classic kung fu and fantasy films, not to mention westerns, comedies, and dramas. In an obvious case, we included Arnold Schwarzenegger's Twins from 1988 and Kindergarten Cop from 1990, because there were action undertones in those movies, but none were found in his comedy Junior from 1994. Yeah, that one covered him being pregnant, a man pregnant. Wow. Talk about predicting the future. Which dealt with him as the world's first pregnant man.
I'm pregnant.
With love, protect, and nurture, and milk with everything I've got in me. Stop it! No, I don't stop it. I want my babies!
In the case of Masters of the Universe, 1987, starring Dolph Lundgren, it was decided that because the movie is generally regarded as a sword and sorcery picture, we excluded it, despite the fact that the film is set in different time periods and that Lundgren's image is still tied to playing He-Man. Hundreds upon hundreds of films were reviewed for this book, upwards of 1,500. This was done to relate who these stars are and were, and what they are and were capable of as action stars. This book is kind to the stars, and kinder still to the people who love them. It would be unfair to slam many of these movies because many of these movies are so easy to slam. I did a reaction on King of the Kickboxers, by the way. I got a lot of heat for that.
Let the girl go!
What we did instead is focus on the star, and in lieu of a rating system, we decided to present each film with more than a fair amount of text to review each film equally on the same playing field. A rating system would defeat the purpose. After all the work and all the research, what we found is that these stars deserve an appreciation of this magnitude, more so now than ever before. In the wake of recent superhero movies like The Dark Knight and Man of Steel, where muscles don't really matter because they're molded on the suits, and super spy films like The Bourne Identity starring Matt Damon, or the Daniel Craig 007 films where lean, athletic actors can convincingly convey an art of fighting enhanced with camera trickery and hyper-stylized editing, the age of the action star is fading. This is the time. This is the opportunity to lift every action star up in the same way at the same speed. As a bonus, we've done the best we can in catching up to many of the action stars, performers, and filmmakers we discussed in the book, and we've included exclusive interviews with them. That's really cool about this book, man. So there are good interviews in here. So read about those 1,500 films, read about the stars, read the interviews. This is going to be a great source and reference for me to make future videos with. I'm going to be using this book quite a bit. One of the greatest pleasures of working on this project was meeting and interviewing some of our heroes, and in one instance, I traveled in 2013 to the Bangkok, Thailand set of Isaac Florentine's Ninja 2, Shadow of a Tear, starring Scott Adkins and King Kusugi, to get a first-hand experience of watching a martial arts action film being made. Speaking of Scott Adkins, man, that's another cool guy that I interviewed on the channel, so make sure to check those videos out.
You're the hard target too.
I am the hard target too, and you're the hard target.
You're the hard target too of the art of action. There you go.
Yeah, I am, man.
We hope that this book finds every fan of every star featured in it happy and content, knowing that the era of good, tough, and deadly action stars lives on in the hundreds of films they've made, and most importantly, in the hearts of their fans. Yeah, that's true, and that's kind of why I created my Make the 80s and 90s Great Again, the Viking Samurai channel, and obviously I don't only cover stuff in the 80s and 90s, but that's when the best stuff was made, in my opinion, in the action and martial arts genre. So I'm kind of continuing the legacy on my channel, just like David J. Moore's and books and documentaries and other things he does. Anyway, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is David J. Moore, did he hit the nail on the head as far as describing what an action star is and why Bruce Willis and some other guys like Kurt Russell and Mel Gibson are not action stars? Let me know in the comments. You know, good or bad, I'll share the comments with David.